No one marries a fat girl, she said. The Millionaire CEO smiled. Let's prove them wrong. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. She looked down at the mirror, the harsh fluorescent light above her flickering against the bathroom tiles. Her lipstick trembled in her hand as she whispered to herself, "No one marries a fat girl." Her reflection didn't argue, it never did. Outside, laughter echoed from the ballroom where champagne flutes clinked and heels tapped across marble floors. She smoothed her dress, a deep emerald fabric that fit tighter than she'd hoped. The tag had called it plus-size elegant, but to her it just screamed too much. Lucy Tran took one last breath before stepping out. The hotel ballroom was a glittering sea of perfect figures and sharp tuxedos. Every woman seemed sculpted, every man looked like he belonged in a magazine. And there she was, a marketing assistant who'd stumbled into a billionaire's engagement gala she wasn't even supposed to attend. Her ex-boyfriend was there, of course, wrapped around his new fiancée model with collarbones sharp enough to cut glass. The same guy who once told her she should tone down the desserts. Lucy forced a smile, clutching her purse like a shield. As she turned toward the exit, she bumped straight into him. Ethan Cole. The Ethan Cole, CEO of Cole Industries. The man whose face appeared on magazine covers and tech headlines. The man who could ruin a room's noise with one glance. "I'm sorry," she stammered, stepping back. He looked at her for a long second, steady, assessing, but his voice was calm. "You okay?" "Yeah, just wrong place, wrong body," she muttered before she could stop herself. His brow lifted slightly. "Wrong body?" She laughed awkwardly. "I shouldn't even be here. Everyone's looking at me like I broke into a Dior ad. No one marries a fat girl anyway." She meant it as a joke, a self-defense, but her voice cracked at the end. For a moment, the noise around them dulled. Ethan's gaze softened. He didn't smile out of pity. He smiled like someone who just decided something. "Then let's prove them wrong," he said quietly. Lucy blinked, half sure she misheard. "What? Marry me?" he repeated, his tone even. "Think of it as a deal." The words hit like a thunderclap. Around them, people turned. Somewhere, a glass shattered. "You're joking," she whispered. "I don't joke about business or justice." His hand extended, calm, steady. "You help me fix a problem, and I'll help you fix yours." She stared at his hand, heart pounding in her chest so loud it drowned the music. For one reckless heartbeat, she wondered what if this was the moment her story stopped being a punchline. The cameras flashed nearby, and his voice dropped lower. "You want to walk out of here as their joke or as my wife?" The air shifted. Lucy's throat tightened, and her pulse raced like thunder under her skin. Maybe it was madness, maybe it was fate. Either way, she took his hand. The next morning, the news had already spread like perfume through a crowded room, soft, sweet, and impossible to ignore. "Did you see that?" One headline read, "Ethan Cole's Mystery Bride." Lucy sat on the edge of her small apartment bed, her phone buzzing nonstop with messages from coworkers and distant cousins she barely spoke to. She had not slept. Her mind kept replaying last night like a film stuck on loop, the laughter, the cameras, his calm voice. "Marry me. Think of it as a deal." She had said yes, or maybe she had just not said no. Either way, here she was, staring at a notification that read, "Car arriving at 9 a.m. for contract signing." 9 came faster than she expected. A black car waited outside the cracked sidewalk of her building, the driver's suit sharper than anything she owned. Inside the car, silence wrapped around her like glass. Through the tinted window, New York looked both familiar and foreign, people rushing, lives moving, none of them knowing that somewhere inside a luxury sedan, a woman who had been mocked for her size was about to sign her name next to a billionaire's. Ethan waited in his office, a space so vast it could have fit her entire apartment twice over. He stood by the window when she entered, sunlight cutting across his jawline. "You came," he said. Lucy tried to sound casual. "I figured if I am going to ruin my life, I should at least do it before lunch." His mouth twitched, a half smile, half respect. On the mahogany table lay the contract. Real paper, not digital, his signature already in black ink. "Clause 7, he said, tapping the page. Both parties shall act with dignity. Lucy read it twice. You wrote this yourself? Every word. He gestured toward the final page. You have the right to withdraw at any time, but if we do this, we do it right. Appearances, events, interviews. You will need a stylist. There will be scrutiny. She looked up. And what do you get out of this? He hesitated, the mask slipping just a little. A reset. My company is drowning in bad press. You will help me look human again. She signed before she could think too long. The pen trembled in her hand, but the line of her name came out steady. Ethan nodded once, then picked up his phone. Get wardrobe ready. She starts today. The next few hours blurred. Fittings, makeup, endless flashes of white fabric and soft lights. She stood in front of a mirror as assistants zipped a pale blue dress around her waist. For the first time in years, the reflection staring back did not look like an apology. Ethan entered the room, mid-fitting, his tie slightly undone, his gaze unreadable. They are going to love you, he said. They will love the story. She arched an eyebrow. Which story is that? The charity case or the human experiment? His eyes held hers for a long moment. The woman who will change how people see beauty, he said quietly. The way he said it made her forget to breathe. That evening they stood together at the steps of Cole Tower, flashes from the press exploding like fireworks. Smile, he murmured near her ear, the warmth of his breath sending a shiver down her spine. Remember, we are married now. She smiled, and it felt both strange and powerful. The reporters shouted questions, voices overlapping. How did you meet? Is this real? What does it feel like to be Mrs. Cole? Lucy looked at Ethan and said softly, surreal. He squeezed her hand. For a second, under all the noise and lights, she could almost believe it was real. As they walked inside, the camera still clicking, Lucy whispered, I hope you know what you are doing. Ethan replied, for the first time in a long time, I think I do. And for reasons she could not explain, that scared her even more than the lie itself. The next week moved like a storm Lucy could not control. Every morning began with a schedule from Ethan's assistant. Every minute planned to shape her into the image of a perfect CEO's wife. Breakfast at the Cole penthouse was a quiet ritual of polished silver and crystal glasses, the city spread beneath them like a painting. She was still learning which fork to use, how to smile without looking forced, how to keep her chin high when the cameras flashed. Ethan watched her sometimes, not with judgment but calculation, as if studying the data of her presence. You do not need to change everything, he said one morning, pouring coffee into a porcelain cup. Just remember, people see what you show them. Lucy gave a small laugh. So, what should I show them? That I can fit into your world? Show them that the world is big enough to fit you. She wanted to believe him, but every fitting, every press event, every stylist's whispered a little tighter here, felt like proof that she did not belong. At their first official event together, a charity dinner for mental health awareness, Lucy wore a long navy gown that hugged her curves like silk water. Cameras clicked the moment they stepped out of the car. Reporters shouted questions, and Ethan's hand found hers, steady, protective. Smile, he murmured. She did, though her heart raced. Inside the ballroom, the air shimmered with perfume and soft jazz. A woman in a diamond choker leaned in and whispered just loud enough, she must have a golden personality. Lucy felt the sting but stayed silent. She had promised herself not to cry, not tonight. During dinner, Ethan stood to speak about his new foundation. His voice was confident, the crowd hanging on every word. Then, to her shock, he gestured toward her. And this project, he said, was inspired by someone who reminded me that dignity is not something you are given, it is something you claim. All eyes turned to her. For a heartbeat, Lucy forgot to breathe. Later, outside on the balcony, she exhaled into the cool night air. You did not have to say that, she said quietly as he joined her. Ethan shrugged. It was true. You make it sound so simple, she said. You stand there, say things like dignity and beauty, and people listen, but they do not see what it costs. Ethan leaned on the railing beside her. You think I do not know what it costs to be judged for what you look like? She looked at him, skeptical. You are a billionaire, Ethan. He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. And yet every room I walk into, someone thinks they know me before I speak. Money just changes the reason they hate you. His words caught her off guard. For the first time, she saw something fragile behind the steel. So that is why you chose me? She asked. Because I make you look human? He turned toward her. No, because you make me feel like one. The sound of the city below filled the silence between them. Then, a sudden flash of photographer, leaning over the railing. Ethan moved instantly, placing a hand on her back, pulling her closer as if protecting her. The picture would hit every headline the next morning. Ethan Cole holds wife tenderly under the stars. Lucy laughed when she saw it. They think it was romantic. Ethan's voice came from behind her. Wasn't it? She turned, about to reply, but his gaze lingered long enough that her breath hitched. For a moment, the world outside, the contracts, the cameras, all of it faded. Then he stepped back, the distance between them snapping like a string. "We have another interview tomorrow," he said. "Get some rest." She watched him leave, the echo of his words tangled with her heartbeat. For the first time since the deal began, she was not sure who was pretending anymore. Lucy woke before sunrise, the soft hum of the city breaking through the glass walls of the penthouse. Her life had turned into a sequence of perfectly arranged days, polished smiles, and staged affection. But somewhere between the flash of cameras and the whispered comments, something inside her had begun to change. She no longer flinched when she saw her reflection. The woman in the mirror stood taller, not because the world had accepted her, but because she had started to accept herself. Ethan noticed it too. One morning as she poured coffee at the long marble counter, he said quietly, "You are different lately." She looked up, surprised. "Different how?" "You do not apologize when you walk into a room anymore." She tried to laugh it off. "That is because I stopped tripping on my heels." He smiled faintly, setting his tablet aside. "No, it is more than that." Before she could respond, his phone rang and the spell broke. The call was from a board member, reminding him of a family dinner that night at his mother's estate. "You should come," he said after hanging up. "Family dinner? That sounds personal." "It is part of the deal," he reminded her, though his tone was softer now. That evening, the Cole family mansion glowed like a museum in gold light. Ethan's mother, elegant and sharp-eyed, greeted Lucy with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "So this is the woman who finally made headlines without scandal," she said. Lucy forced a polite laugh. Dinner was a silent war fought with silver forks and thin smiles. Every time Lucy lifted her glass, she could feel Mrs. Cole's gaze dissecting her, measuring, judging. When dessert came, the conversation shifted to legacy, image, and reputation. "Mrs. Cole turned to Lucy and said sweetly, 'My son has always been generous, perhaps too generous. You must understand how the world can misinterpret kindness.'" Lucy smiled, her voice steady. "Yes, but I also know kindness is the only thing that cannot be faked." The table went quiet. Ethan looked at her, pride flickering across his face. After dinner, he found her outside near the fountain. "You handled that well," he said. "I grew up being underestimated," she replied. "You learn to speak carefully when people expect you to stay quiet." He nodded. "I know the feeling." For a moment they stood in silence, the night air cool against their skin. Then, without warning, a flash of lightning split the sky, followed by rain. Lucy laughed as droplets hit her hair. Ethan moved closer, his jacket draped over her shoulders before she could protest. "You will catch a cold," he said. "You sound like someone who cares," she teased. His eyes met hers. "Maybe I do." The words hung between them like static. The rain thickened, and he reached up to brush a strand of wet hair from her face. His hand lingered just a second too long, his thumb tracing the line of her cheek. The sound of her heartbeat filled the space where words should have been. Then, just as quickly, he stepped back. "We should go inside," he said, his voice lower now. Back in the car, neither of them spoke. The rain tapped softly against the windows, a steady rhythm that seemed to echo the things they were not ready to say. When they reached the penthouse, Lucy turned to him before stepping out. "You do not have to keep pretending," she said quietly. Ethan's hand froze on the door handle. "Pretending what? That this is just business." He did not answer, and she did not wait for him to. She walked inside, the sound of her heels fading into the silence. Behind her, Ethan stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his hair, his expression caught somewhere between fear and something dangerously close to love. The next few days were a blur of distance and silence. Ethan buried himself in meetings, press calls, and shareholder updates, while Lucy drifted through the penthouse like a ghost wearing designer heels. The air between them felt heavier than before, thick with everything they had not said. At breakfast, they sat across from each other, the sound of cutlery louder than any conversation. We have the foundation gala on Friday, Ethan said finally, his tone all business. Lucy nodded. Of course, Mr. Cole, she replied, her voice cool and polite. He looked up sharply, but she had already gone back to her coffee. That Friday came like a storm she could not avoid. Her stylist had chosen a deep red gown that made her skin glow under the lights. The mirror showed a woman who looked powerful, unshakable. But inside, she felt like glass. When the car pulled up to the venue, flashes erupted immediately. Ethan stepped out first, then offered his hand to her, the cameras eating up every inch of their so-called chemistry. She smiled for the lenses, but her heart was somewhere far away. Inside, the ballroom glittered with chandeliers and champagne. Lucy could hear fragments of conversation around her, words like lucky, unexpected, and temporary. Every whisper felt like a needle under her skin. Ethan moved through the crowd effortlessly, greeting investors and journalists. She followed, her smile perfectly rehearsed, until a familiar voice sliced through the noise. "Lucy Tran?" She turned. Standing a few feet away was Mark Davis, her former co-worker from her old marketing firm, the one who had leaked her photo to social media months ago, captioned with cruel jokes about her body. "I almost did not recognize you," he said with a smirk. "Guess miracles happen." The laughter from the group around him stung, but before Lucy could speak, Ethan appeared at her side. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice quiet but cold. Mark shrugged. "None at all, just surprised to see Lucy here. I mean, she was not exactly what?" Ethan interrupted, his tone sharper now. "Worthy?" Mark hesitated, eyes darting between them. "Look, I did not mean." "You did," Ethan cut in. "You meant every word. And you are wrong." The silence that followed was loud enough to draw attention. Cameras turned. Reporters leaned in. Ethan reached for Lucy's hand and lifted it slightly. "This woman," he said clearly, "has more class, more heart, and more strength than anyone in this room pretending to be perfect." The room went still. Even Mark backed away, his face pale. Lucy's throat tightened, her eyes burning, but she forced a steady breath. "Thank you," she whispered as Ethan guided her away. They slipped out onto the terrace, the cool air washing over them like relief. "You did not have to do that," she said. "He deserved worse," Ethan replied. "You do not need to fight my battles," she said softly. "Maybe I need to fight my own too," he answered, his gaze distant. For a moment they stood side by side, looking out over the city lights. "Why do you care so much?" she asked finally. "Because every time someone tries to humiliate you, I see the part of me that used to believe I had to be perfect," he said. "You make me want to be better." Lucy looked at him, searching for a lie and finding none. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was fragile, trembling, alive. He took a slow breath and said quietly, "We are not fooling anyone anymore, are we?" She shook her head. "No, we are not." For a heartbeat, the distance between them disappeared. Then a voice from inside called Ethan's name, breaking the moment. He glanced back toward the ballroom, then at her. "This is not over," he said. Lucy smiled faintly. "I know." And as he walked back inside, she stayed on the terrace, her pulse still echoing in the rhythm of his words. Days turned into weeks, and the illusion of calm began to crack. The morning after the gala, Lucy woke to her phone buzzing relentlessly. News outlets, gossip blogs, and business channels were all replaying the same clip: Ethan Cole defending his wife with words that sounded too real to be rehearsed. "Is this love or strategy?" One headline read. "The billionaire's bold declaration," said another. Lucy scrolled until her stomach twisted. Every comment was an argument about her body, her worth, her place beside a man like Ethan. She turned off her phone and walked out to the balcony. Below, the city buzzed as if nothing had changed, but everything inside her had. She had wanted to believe his words, but part of her knew that in his world, even kindness had a price tag. When Ethan came home that evening, he looked exhausted. "Damage control all day," he said, loosening his tie. "Apparently defending your wife is bad for stock prices." Lucy frowned. "So that is what I am to them? A market risk?" "That is what you are to them," he said gently. "Not to me." She wanted to believe him, but something in his tone made her pause. "Ethan," she said quietly, "tell me the truth. Was that speech about me or about your company?" He looked at her for a long time, and when he spoke, it was almost a whisper. "Both." The honesty stung more than a lie would have. She turned away, blinking back tears. "Thank you for your honesty, Mr. Cole," she said, her voice trembling just enough to hurt. That night, Lucy could not sleep. She went to the guest room, the one that had slowly become her space, and stared at the city lights until dawn. The next morning, she packed a small suitcase. Ethan found her by the door, suitcase in hand, her expression calm but final. "Where are you going?" he asked, panic breaking through his controlled tone. "Home," she said simply. "I do not know who I am here anymore. I came into your world to prove something, but I do not even know what that is now." "Lucy, wait," he said, stepping closer. "If this is about what I said, it is about everything," she interrupted softly. "The cameras, the contracts, the pretending. You keep saying dignity cannot be faked, but we have been faking everything." He reached for her hand, but she pulled back. "I need to breathe, Ethan. I need to remember what it feels like to be real." She left before he could stop her, the elevator doors closing between them like a curtain. Outside, the rain had started again, soft and relentless. She took a taxi to her old neighborhood, where the streets were cracked but familiar. Her mother's house still smelled like lavender and coffee. When Lucy walked in, her mother looked up from the kitchen table, her face lighting with a tired but genuine smile. "You came home," she said, her voice full of warmth Lucy had almost forgotten existed. That night Lucy cooked dinner, laughed, and for the first time in months, felt human again. Meanwhile, Ethan stood alone in the penthouse, staring at the contract on his desk. The paper that had once felt like control now looked like a confession. The ink beside her name was smudged where a tear had fallen when she signed it. He picked it up, folded it carefully, and placed it in a drawer. For the first time in his life, Ethan Cole realized that power meant nothing without peace, and peace meant nothing without her. He grabbed his keys, rain still streaking across the windows, and whispered to himself, "This time, no contracts." Then he left, the echo of the door closing behind him, carrying the sound of a man ready to fight for something real. Lucy's days at home passed quietly, filled with small, ordinary moments that felt more honest than anything in the penthouse. She helped her mother in the garden, ran errands through streets that still smelled of rain and coffee, and for the first time in a long time, she did not feel like someone being watched. Yet even in that peace, Ethan lingered in her mind like a shadow that would not leave. Each night, she told herself not to check the news, but curiosity always won. His face was everywhere. Business reports, interviews, stock updates. But behind his polished smile, she saw exhaustion. The world was speculating about their separation now, calling it a publicity stunt gone wrong. One afternoon, while Lucy was preparing tea, her phone buzzed. It was an email from the Cole Foundation's board. Subject line, termination notice. The message was short. Due to recent events, the foundation's operations would be frozen pending restructuring. Her name was listed as associated personnel. Lucy stared at the screen, realization settling like a stone in her chest. Someone had leaked her contract. Within hours, her inbox flooded with messages, some cruel, some sympathetic, all intrusive. She turned off her phone, trembling. The doorbell rang a few minutes later. Her mother peeked through the window and gasped, "Lucy, it is him." Ethan stood outside, drenched from the rain, his hair plastered to his forehead. Lucy opened the door but said nothing. He looked at her with tired eyes. "You saw it," he said. "The board released it without my approval." "That contract was supposed to be private," she said, her voice steady but cold. "It made me look like a joke, Ethan. Like I was hired for sympathy points." "I am fixing it," he said quickly. "I already called a press conference." "To say what? That your fake wife ran off because the story did not sell anymore?" He flinched at her words. "To tell the truth," he said. "All of it." She folded her arms. "You think that helps me?" Ethan took a step closer, desperation in his voice. "Lucy, they can think whatever they want about me, but they will not drag you through the mud for loving me." Her breath caught. "Who said I loved you?" He looked at her then, really looked, no mask, no arrogance. "You did not have to," he said quietly. "I see it every time you look at me, and it is the same thing I see every time I look at you." Her mother's voice broke the silence from the hallway. "Maybe you should both come inside before you drown out there." Lucy hesitated, then stepped aside. Ethan entered, dripping water onto the wooden floor. For a while, they sat at the kitchen table like strangers sharing a storm. Finally, Lucy asked, "Why now, Ethan? Why fight for me after all this?" He sighed, running a hand through his wet hair. Because I spent years building a world that looked perfect, and you walked in and showed me it was hollow. I cannot go back to pretending." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "The contract," he said. "Clause 7 dignity. You reminded me what that meant." He tore it in half, the sound sharp in the quiet room. Lucy stared at the torn pieces, her heart thudding. "That was supposed to be our agreement," she said softly. "It still is," he replied. "Only now there are no terms, no signatures, no deadlines." Rain pattered against the window like applause. Lucy wanted to speak, but words failed. Ethan stood, his voice unsteady but sincere. "Tomorrow, I will stand in front of every camera that tried to humiliate you, and I will tell them you were never a contract. You were my choice." For the first time, she believed him, and that terrified her more than anything. The following morning, New York was already buzzing before sunrise. Every major network had set up cameras outside the Cole Tower. The city smelled like wet asphalt and tension. Inside the building, Ethan stood before a mirror, straightening his tie. His reflection looked like a man about to lose everything, and for once, he did not care. Lucy watched the news from her mother's living room. Her stomach twisted as reporters speculated about what he would say. Her mother placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Maybe he means it this time," she said softly. "You do not go to war with your own board for publicity." Lucy nodded but said nothing. When the press conference began, the room fell silent. Ethan stepped up to the podium, flashes from cameras blinding him. He looked down at his notes, then set them aside. His voice, when it came, was steady. "For years, I believed reputation was everything. I built an empire around control and image. But image can lie. People can lie. What cannot lie is kindness," the room murmured. He continued, "You all saw the contract. You all know her name, Lucy Tran. Yes, she signed it. Yes, it began as an agreement. But what you do not know is that she was the first person in years to speak to me without wanting something. She challenged me, humbled me, and reminded me that dignity is not a brand. It is a choice." Reporters began shouting questions, but Ethan raised a hand. "I am not here to defend myself. I am here to apologize. To Lucy. To everyone who judged her because of how she looks. And to every person who was told they are not enough. She is more than enough. She was never my image problem. She was my mirror." Cameras clicked furiously. The speech spread across social media within minutes. Clips looping under headlines like "Billionaire confesses real feelings" and "Ethan Cole breaks the internet." Lucy sat frozen, her eyes wet before she even realized she was crying. Her mother handed her a tissue and whispered, "Go." "What?" Lucy asked. "Go to him?" You do not need permission to forgive someone who finally learned how to tell the truth. By the time Lucy reached Cole Tower, the crowd outside had grown massive. Reporters shouted as she stepped out of the cab, microphones thrust toward her face. "Lucy, are you still his wife? Was it all real?" She did not answer. She walked straight through the front doors, past security, up the marble stairs, her heart pounding like a drum. Ethan was still on stage, surrounded by chaos, when she appeared at the edge of the crowd. He froze mid-sentence, eyes locking on her as if the world had stopped moving. "Lucy," he said softly, microphone forgotten in his hand. The crowd parted as she walked toward him. "You said I was your mirror," she said, voice trembling. "Do you still see me clearly?" "Clearer than ever," he replied, "but only if you are still looking back." She smiled through her tears. "I came to return something." From her purse, she pulled out the small silver necklace he had given her during their first photo shoot, the one she had left behind when she walked away. She placed it in his hand. "I do not need this to remember who I am," she said, "but I thought maybe you did." He closed his hand around it, eyes shining. "Then keep this," he said, pulling a single folded paper from his pocket, the torn contract, now taped together down the middle. "Clause 7, he whispered. "Both parties shall act with dignity. I am ready to live by it. No signatures needed." The room erupted in applause, flashes bursting like fireworks. Lucy laughed through her tears as Ethan stepped closer. "So what now?" she asked. "Now," he said, "we start for real." He took her hand, and for the first time she did not feel like someone being rescued. She felt like someone choosing to stay. The weeks that followed felt like breathing after holding her breath for too long. The world did not stop talking about them, but this time Lucy did not flinch when she saw her name online. The narrative had changed. Headlines that once mocked her now called her the woman who made a billionaire believe in kindness. Ethan's confession had gone viral, not as scandal, but as something oddly pure. He had turned public shame into public truth, and somehow that truth had set them both free. Together, they built something new. The Cole Foundation reopened under Lucy's direction, its mission redefined to promote self-worth, inclusivity, and mental health awareness. She turned the same criticism that once broke her into fuel for change. Her first project was called The Beauty of Being Enough, a traveling photo exhibition featuring people of all shapes, ages, and stories. Each portrait was paired with one line: "Dignity is not a gift, it is a choice." On opening night, the gallery was filled with soft lights and quiet awe. Cameras clicked, but for the first time, Lucy was not the one being judged. She was the one being celebrated. Ethan stood beside her, his hand lightly resting on hers. "You did this," he said. "No," she replied. "We did." He smiled, looking at her like she was the only thing in the room worth seeing. "You know," he said, "I have been thinking about Clause 7. She laughed softly. "The dignity clause?" "Yes," he said. "It is time we add an amendment." "Oh, really?" she teased. "And what would that be?" "That love," he said, "is the only contract worth signing twice." Before she could answer, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. The crowd seemed to fade into silence as he opened it. Inside was not a diamond ring, but a thin silver band engraved with the words, "Let us prove them wrong." Her breath caught. "Ethan," she whispered, tears forming instantly, "you do not have to do this." "I know," he said. "That is why it means something." He knelt not in spectacle but in sincerity. No cameras this time, no contracts, no clauses. Just a question. His voice softened. "Lucy Tran, will you marry me? For real this time?" She covered her mouth with both hands, laughing and crying all at once. "You are unbelievable," she said. "And yet, yes." The room erupted in applause. Flashbulbs burst, but neither of them looked away from each other. Ethan stood, sliding the ring gently onto her finger. "Then let us prove them wrong forever," he said. She smiled through tears. "We already did." Months later, the press would call it the most honest love story in corporate history. But for Lucy, it was simpler than that. It was waking up every morning without apology. It was Ethan making breakfast badly but trying anyway. It was learning that love does not fix you. It frees you to stop pretending you are broken. One evening, as they walked hand in hand through Central Park, the city lights shimmering around them, Lucy stopped. "Do you ever think about how it started?" she asked. Ethan chuckled. "You mean when you told me no one marries a fat girl?" She laughed, shaking her head. "Yes, that." He pulled her close, his voice low against her ear. "Good thing I never listened," she smiled, leaning into him. "Good thing you didn't. The camera of life would have faded there if it were a movie, two silhouettes walking beneath the golden light, proof that love built on truth can outshine any lie. But this was not a movie. It was real, messy, beautiful, and theirs. And as Lucy whispered against the night air, "We proved them wrong," Ethan squeezed her hand and said, "Always,